Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yamin of Revolution. I got a World War III alert. I got some late breaking news the revolutionaries can use. Russia warns all foreigners to leave Ukraine now or die. Putin is done playing. But before we get into that, y'all be sure to wipe y'all feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform. Y'all salute family. The hardest working man in the news business is back because there's a lot going on. The U.S. have broke the ceasefire and attacked Iran, so that could heat back up. But Russia's done playing. We might have World War III. Let's get into the content. Salute.
Russia says Ukraine crossed the last straw. Now Moscow is warning foreigners to flee Kyiv before.
I was going to start my live with U.S. have attacked Iran. Iran say fisherman was killed. I'm pretty sure Israel baited Trump into doing this. So the U.S.-Iran war could absolutely be starting back tonight. But what Russia is doing in Ukraine should be what the whole world is looking at, because the Russian citizens and military generals and the people that's forcing Putin to stop playing games, or I'm being honest, Putin might be removed from power, bro. They done playing. I never thought I'd see the day where the people tired of playing with Putin. They telling them, you get rid of those damn Nazis in NATO, or they going to be done with Putin. That's just a fact. So Putin's saying, hey, I got to do what y'all said.
Before a new wave of strikes begins. Hypersonic missiles are back. Drones are exploding across the front lines, and the Kremlin is threatening systematic attacks on the capital. The question now, how far is Russia about to go?
Great Lavrov called Marco Rubio, and anytime Russia do some big shooting in Ukraine, they're going to call the U.S. first to warn them, hey, look, we finna do this, ain't nothing y'all can do about it. So he warned them, get all of y'all diplomats out of Kyiv. And he told them, get all of the foreigners out the capital of Ukraine. We're warning you now to do that. So once that warning done, it's all hell finna break loose. That's just a fact.
Kyiv is once again under the shadow of escalation. Russia is now openly warning of a systematic series of strikes targeting Ukraine's defense industry in the capital.
Ukraine killed some kids in a dormitory the other day. That was the straw that broke the camel's back.
While urging
targeted them babies for no reason.
Foreign citizens and diplomatic personnel to leave the city immediately. Russia's Ministry of Defense said
the planned strikes are retaliation for a Ukrainian drone attack last week on the occupied city of Starobilsk in the Luhansk region.
According to Russian authorities, the strike hit a student dormitory and killed at least 18 people while wounding more than 40 others.
That was a big mistake.
Moscow described the attack as one of the deadliest Ukrainian drone strikes in recent months. In a statement issued on Monday, Russia's foreign ministry called the Starobilsk attack the last straw.
The strike on Starobilsk is yet another blatant demonstration of the Nazi and terrorist nature of the Kyiv regime, which deliberately attacks civilians and does not hesitate to murder children in cold blood.
The ministry warned that Russia would now begin a series of systematic strikes against facilities linked to Ukraine's drone warfare program. According to the statement, Russian forces intend to target specific sites where UAVs are designed, manufactured, programmed, and prepared for use. Russia also claimed that many of those facilities are located throughout Kyiv. In an unusually direct warning, Moscow urged foreign citizens, including diplomatic personnel and staff from international organizations, to leave the Ukrainian capital as soon as possible.
Now, do you see the U.S. and Israel started that, being cute and dropping leaflets over people's villages and their cities, saying, we give you a warning, leave this area before we start bombing. So that's what Russia's doing. They doing just with the U.S. Okay, we giving the warning. All of the foreigners, you better leave the capital of Ukraine now. We gave you a warning. This is all international law require. We're warning the citizens, don't be near no military facilities. Don't be nowhere. Nobody fixing on no drones. We don't give a damn if it's an apartment complex. We don't give a damn if you hit it in a school or a church. Don't be near it or you're going to get it. anybody making decisions to carry out military operations. If that's your husband, you don't need to be around him. If that's your son, you better get away from him.
The statement also advised Kyiv residents to avoid military and administrative infrastructure facilities as strikes intensify. Ukraine has strongly denied responsibility for the attack on the student dormitory in Starobilsk. Ukrainian military officials said their forces had instead targeted what they described as an elite Russian drone command unit operating in the area. Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha dismissed Moscow's threats and urged allies not to surrender to what he called Russian blackmail. Despite the warnings, more than 70 foreign diplomats visited a heavily damaged neighborhood in Kyiv on Monday to pay respects to victims of recent Russian strikes. French Ambassador Gaël Vessière said daily life in Kyiv continued despite the attacks.
It's a way to demonstrate resilience, and I think it's extremely important that we, around the world, support that.
However, Russia's threats are unlikely to be dismissed lightly. Since the Starobilsk strike, Moscow has intensified missile and drone attacks on Kyiv and surrounding areas.
Russia, hope they don't listen.
Ukrainian authorities reported that overnight strikes killed at least 4 people and injured more than 60 others in the capital region. Now, as Moscow...
people my ass, they already say there's a lot of you. We don't play. Generals, all kind of people died yesterday, all kind of soldiers. See, they never tell the truth. The most devastating missile attack since the beginning of the Ukraine war, they lie and tell you 4 people was killed. See, now I want you to remember this. Everybody who's been paying attention to the Russia-Ukraine war, as I've been bringing it, know damn well the U.S. Patriot system and all that shit don't work. It never worked. But Iran done proved that. Now, the whole world know none of those systems really work. They want you to believe that Iran missiles can defeat the Patriot missile system by attacking all our bases, all the Israeli bases, all the bases in the Middle East. But they want you to believe that the air defense systems in Ukraine, which is the same damn thing, is better. And Russia can't really get to what the targets they're trying to hit. That's just lie. That these people control the propaganda machine, but the whole world know it's not true.
Moscow openly threatens broader attacks on Kyiv's defense infrastructure and warns foreigners to leave the capital. Concerns are mounting that the war is moving into an even more dangerous stage of escalation, with civilians increasingly caught in the middle. No breakthrough on the battlefield. Only
Well, my dear truth seekers, judging by the information coming from the West, it becomes clear that yesterday's massive Russian missile strike on Ukraine, using the world's most powerful intermediate-range ballistic missile Orshnik, came as a real shock to both representatives of the Kyiv regime and their Western masters. The most shocking thing was that on the night of May 24th, Russia demonstratively attacked the most heavily defended facilities in Kyiv and other major cities of Ukraine. With this attack, Russia has once again demonstrated that even the best Western air defense systems are completely defenseless against the latest Russian ballistic and hypersonic missiles. By the way, the number of destroyed facilities in Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities turned out to be so high that even the propaganda of the Ukrainian General Staff did not help hide the true scale of the destruction. My dear truth seekers, let me remind you that in their report, representatives of the Ukrainian General Staff officially stated that the country's air defense successfully repelled an enemy massive missile strike, allegedly shooting down 80% of Russian missiles and drones. However, even Ukrainian TG channels and independent journalists called this statement a blatant lie. According to them, on the night of May 24th, the country's air defense proved powerless against Russian missiles. At the same time, they blamed Kiev's so-called Western allies for the failure of the Ukrainian air defense. According to them, Russia was able to hit such a large number of targets only because the West refuses to supply interceptor missiles to Ukraine. The head of the Kiev regime, Volodymyr Zelensky, also added fuel to the fire. In particular, on the morning of May 25, commenting on the consequences of the Russian missile strike, he was forced to admit that the Ukrainian air defense had failed to intercept the missiles. He also added that the United States and European countries should act more decisively towards Russia, in order to ensure that Moscow's acts do not go unpunished. Furthermore, experts and network users noted that Zelensky recorded this address in an unknown location, and the traditional background of the Ukrainian president's office was overlaid later. Experts say that this fact indicates that the head of the Kiev regime is seriously afraid that Russia may destroy the office building of the Ukrainian president, and in this regard, Zelensky tries not to leave his underground bunker, even when the air alarm does not sound. It is noteworthy that even Ukrainian experts recognize the fact that if Russia sets itself the goal of killing Zelensky, even the most secure underground bunkers will not save him. Meanwhile, on the morning of May 25, new details emerged about the Russian missile strike, during which Russia for the first time used a large number of hypersonic missiles, as well as 2 of the latest Orshnik intermediate-range ballistic missiles. So, a few hours ago, footage of the destroyed headquarters of the Ukrainian Army's ground forces appeared. It is noteworthy that this headquarters was located in the so-called protected area of Kiev, which was guarded by the most modern Western air defense systems. By the way, after footage of the destroyed strategic facilities in Kiev and other cities began to spread online, many independent journalists and experts started blaming Zelensky for everything. According to them, Zelensky, knowing that the Ukrainian air defense is powerless against Russian missiles, continues to provoke Moscow with hysterical drone attacks on Russia. At the same time, they admit that these drone attacks have only a media effect, while the Russian army and economy do not receive even minimal damage. Meanwhile, on the morning of May 25, the coordinator of the Nikolaev Underground, Sergei Lebedev, made a rather sensational statement. In particular, he confirmed that the main target of the Russian missiles in Kiev were some well-fortified underground facilities, including a secret underground bunker that Russian intelligence had identified 2 days before the missile attack. It is reported that this is the same secret underground bunker that NATO's top officials regularly used during Russian missile strikes on Ukraine. It is noteworthy that even Ukrainian sources confirm the fact that during yesterday's Russian missile attack, not only Ukraine suffered heavy losses, but also the North Atlantic Alliance. By the way, during the Orshnik strike on Kiev, military experts drew attention to one very interesting fact. As it turned out, each warhead of the Orshnik missile can be separated and individually aimed at the target. Moreover, as it turned out, each warhead of this unique missile can choose the optimal trajectory and impact speed on the target. Simply put, all this indicates that Orshnik was hitting targets in Kiev using artificial intelligence. According to experts, Ukraine is lucky that the Russians are still using Orshnik with empty warheads. They claim that even one of 6 nuclear warheads of the Orshnik missile could cause a nuclear catastrophe in the whole of Kiev. Experts and analysts express confidence that the strike of 2 Orshnik ballistic missiles on the Kiev region was a Russian warning to the West. With this strike, Moscow made it clear that the West is vulnerable to Russian missiles, and that in the event of an escalation, Orshnik will strike NATO states. By the way, the effect of using the Orshnik missile turned out to be so impressive that Ukrainian deputies began demanding an urgent end to the war and the signing of a peace treaty with Russia. For example, Ukrainian deputies Alexei Goncharenko and Maxim Buzansky called on Zelensky to stop provoking Russia and sign a peace treaty with Moscow as soon as possible. Moreover, the Orshnik strike on Kiev even scared such Russophobic countries as Britain and France. As it turned out, on May 25, France and Britain were among the 5 NATO countries that blocked the North Atlantic Alliance's plan for annual military assistance to the Ukrainian army.
Days of Oreshnik missiles that were seen hitting targets. There has been some reporting out today, just within the last couple of hours. Russia warns strike on decision-making centers in Ukraine. And the armed forces are, according to the article here, this is Russian media, RIA Novosti, the armed forces are starting to strike at military industrial complex enterprises in Kiev, including specific places for design, production, programming, and preparation for the use of UAVs by Kiev regime, with the assistance of NATO specialists responsible for the supply of components, the provision of intelligence and targeting. They will be applied both to decision-making centers and command posts, the Russian department warned. All these facilities are located in the Ukrainian capital, so ministry urged diplomats and representatives in international organizations to leave the city as soon as possible, and local residents not to approach military and administrative infrastructure. Now listen, President Putin has been coming under increasing pressure inside of Russia here of late because he has not been able to even get the so-called special military operations, the SMO objectives of getting all of the Donbass, and now rolling into 5 years. And so he's been coming under a lot of pressure. Why haven't you been doing this? And one of the criticisms that he had been coming under was, why have you left the gloves off on all of these key areas in Kiev? If that's where the command centers are, if that's where the production centers are, why have you left those off the target list? Because they're all used up here. They can complain about what happens from NATO and these 50 nations that support them, et cetera, but they're going to say, look, at the very least, this is a military conflict. Yeah, there's some of them there, just amazing, amazing shots. These are coming from the capital city, and I think that we're going to get it here in a second. There's some pretty dramatic shots of the missiles coming in the nighttime. But they're saying, look, let this be the beginning of something, not the end of something, because we need to continue doing this. Otherwise, we have no chance to win the war. And on the way, just here in the last few days, there's been a number of articles in the open Russian press debating this war. Oftentimes we say, oh, well, there's no freedom of speech or anything on the Russian side, but it turns out that actually there are. It's limited because if you go too far, you can get yourself thrown in jail, and many have. But this, for example, this morning I read on one of their military review. I think it's the military review on the Russian language. It was just translated by Google Translate. There have been discussions on the pros and cons of continuing this special military operations or stopping it. And a lot of the discussion is, hey, look, because the Ukraine side just continues to find, whether it's stealing them off the street or not, whether it's mobilization or not, they find men to keep putting them in there up on the front. So no matter how many we kill, there's always somebody to replace them. And so we're not destroying the military. It's just kind of churning. Every time you kill somebody, another one comes up, but the military stays relatively stable. The front lines don't move very much because of the drones, especially. That's the other thing that it's open press, open discussion, is that Ukraine has advanced a lot in drone capabilities. They've advanced in the ability to hit behind the Russian lines more effectively than before, because they continue doing research and development and coming up with capabilities that just didn't exist even 6 months ago in some cases. And Russia hasn't found a bypass for some of these. We've shown you, of course, some of the long-range shots that have been happening deep inside Russia, but even in the operational rear areas, in the supply zones have been hit. And so a lot of these analysts on the Russian side are saying, look, there's no prospect that this is going to be over for the foreseeable future, a year, 2 years, and there's no even projected end date there. And so we don't do ourselves any favor. It's not helping us to continue fighting a special military operation as opposed to a full mobilized war if we're not going to succeed. And so there's apparently a group within Russia that's saying, we just need to just get the war knocked out, get it over with. And they didn't say, at least these analysts didn't say what the terms would be on that, but they said it's pointless to keep fighting something we can't win. And we don't have the resources and the time to be able to win at a low cost. And of course, there's other analysts that have the opposite opinion. They say, no, we definitely can. And we should continue to press forward. We should press harder. And one wonders if that's part of what's starting to happen here, in that they're now starting to hit these facilities. This is the first time, some of these, first time they've been hit at all. There's been some drones and some other stuff that have been hitting targets in Kiev for a long time. But of the important things and the decision-making centers and of the leaders, those have been off target or off limits. But now apparently they're on. And this latest address here today by the Russian ministry saying, hey, foreigners, diplomats, y'all need to get out of Kiev, and definitely residents stay away from these military facilities or decision-making centers, because we're coming after them. So presumably when the sun goes down tonight, probably on tomorrow's show, we'll have more video to show you on that, but it could be quite substantial. Ukraine as also, oh yeah, that's what some of the ones right there. Those are some of the really dramatic ones from last night. And that's apparently a lot more than that is coming tonight. But you see that there's nothing you can do to stop that. I mean, whatever air defenses that the Ukraine has, they were literally helpless to this. So if Russia decides that that's what they're going to do, yeah, you can see one of the missiles flying through the air here. One of the other ones, you can actually see it traveling to the ground, and nothing's intercepting it. In fact, even that one there, you don't see any interceptor missiles even going up. They're just, this is Kiev, for crying out loud. This is not just some city. This is Kiev. And so if they're that vulnerable to Russian missiles in the city, you can imagine what they are elsewhere in the front lines. So Russia has very much control of the skies. It's not domination. They still have some limitations, but some. And then you see in terms of what the missiles are, Russia has definitely the dominance right now. So they can make good on this if they decide they're going to hit some important decision-making centers, some important missile concerns, or other factories. They're going to hit them because you've got literally nothing to stop them. Meanwhile, the Ukraine side is in some sense looking to expand this. Now, we showed you last week, whether it was Karaganov or a couple of other well-known Russian folks who were saying, hey, we need to escalate into Europe. And we need to hit the same kind of targets that they're hitting in Kiev. We need to hit them in their cities, where their missile factories and their drone factories, and some of the other places where they have supply hubs, whatever, things that are funneling lethal military capabilities into Ukraine. We need to hit them over there. Well, turns out that it's not just the Russians who are thinking about expanding, but even Zelensky is reported to. There have been increasing numbers of Ukrainian troops move south of Belarus. Now, you may think, Belarus, why there? At least from what I've seen, there's not been any reported massing of Russian troops in Belarus like there was when the war started in February 2022. But Ukraine's moving them up there. And there are some suggestions that he may be hoping that Belarus enters the war and that they can then fight a battle there, so that he can look back over here to NATO and say, I got to have, now it's another country against us and we're fighting this two-front war and we can't do it and we need you to come physically help us. I don't know if he would do that or not, but you sure know he would love to. He's been trying to get that since the war started 4.5 years ago nearly. So if he's trying to do that, that's something we need to keep a watch on. Meanwhile, we have Putin himself just made this interesting law, or signed into law today, This law authorizing the use of military forces to, quote, protect Russian citizens abroad. According to this report, Russian President Vladimir Putin signed on May 25th a bill effectively authorizing him to invade foreign countries under the guise of protection of Russian citizens. The legislation passed by the Russian State Duma on May 13th enables Russian president to order troop deployments abroad to protect Russian citizens facing arrest, detention, trial, or other perceived persecution by foreign nations and international courts. And one has to wonder, why now? Why are you passing that law right now? Because you may recall in the lead up to this war that started in February 2022, there were a flurry of laws that were passed where Russia was able to go help the Donbass with their actual military. They had some agreements with the provinces of Donetsk and Luhansk, to help them out, and then they authorized or recognized their independence, and then they ended up absorbing them into the Russian Federation. So there have been times when the laws were changed in Russia right before they needed to be able to cross borders, et cetera. So one again wonders if this, we're talking about a second ago, the pressures inside the American administration with President Trump, some wanting a diplomatic means, some wanting to go more military. You saw in Israel, same situation here. Same thing is going on. We talked about that this morning inside of Iran, where there's a hawkish side and a diplomatic side that wants to feature that. Same thing over on the Russian side, except that the side of more hawkish is starting to gain some ascendancy because they've tried it to use the small. When they say the special military operation, that's not just a euphemism to try to make war not sound bad. It actually has legal ramifications in Russia. If they call it a war, that means different things, and that allows different target sets. That allows the government to do additional things. It allows them to force mobilize. It allows them to force economy to transition into a wartime situation where they don't have a choice. They're told what to do. They change what they produce, etc. So it is a major milestone if they go into a war. And so if they go from a special military operation to that, it implies a much bigger level of operation. So one has to wonder are those advocating for that in the Russian side starting to gain ascendancy? Why did President Putin make that law now, making it authorized for the military to go abroad? Because before they didn't have it. If they were not physically attacked by another country, according to the Russian law, they could not go abroad. And of course, who might be the first target of that but the Baltics in the north? That's one thing if you're launching military long-range missiles in France, Germany, UK even. That's been on the target. That's one of the things that Caragano suggested, for example. But if you're talking the Baltic areas, on the other hand, that might be a more conventional military situation, because here just recently, the Western side and many of the Baltic countries have been openly saying we should take Kaliningrad, which is a Russian enclave that's physically separated from Russia, which has been there since the fall of the Soviet Union. It was negotiated, et cetera. But it's kind of a forward missile base. It's an odd situation here, but there are a lot in the West, even in their last few days, have been saying, man, that's like an eyesore. We should just go get it. You should just run out there and grab it. And so Russia here is hearing all this, and they're saying, you do that, maybe we should go grab this. And of course, there's the sizable Russian population in the ethnic Russian population in the Baltic countries. And so Putin signing this document now could be laying the foundation that, hey, if we start doing some things here, we may take this. And listen, the entirety of the Balkans, all three of those countries, Venezuela, the three Baltic countries, I think their total military ground forces is like a brigade, a combat brigade, reinforced brigade, something like that. It's not even a division level, all of them combined. So if Russia wanted to do something, it would be taking candy from a baby. I mean, they don't have defensive positions. They don't have the industry. They don't have anything except Article 5. That's one of the things they're clinging on to. Well, if that's what they're clinging on to, while they're allowing their airspace to be used reportedly by Ukraine to get into Russian airspace to hit strikes deep inside their country, then Russia's saying you're already involved now. And they have been saying that. They haven't done anything about it up to this point. But that's something we're going to be keeping a lot closer eye on because a lot of pieces are starting to move, and we'll see what happens overnight. We'll definitely be talking in the morning, give you an update of whatever may transmit overnight. But for example, Dmitry Medvedev has said, listen, if we strike targets outside of Russia and if we hit other kinds of things, even inside of Ukraine, it could potentially expand the war. He acknowledges that. But he says, like some others we've talked about recently, he's implying that it could be a greater sin not to do so because it will invite more attacks. And so he says, yeah, we should just keep going and hit even more. So it's possible that there could be some even bigger strikes coming up. And the fact that Russia has used Oreshnik missiles on a couple of occasions here recently tells you how important these things are and how high they put a priority in those, because they don't have that many Oreshnik missiles. They've only started production for, I think, 8 or 9 months, something like that we know of anyway. So they probably don't have that many of them because that's a very sophisticated missile system, and they haven't been doing it very long. So they probably don't have many. And the fact that they've used some now implies that they put some really high priority on some of these. So we'll see how a lot of that's going to work out there, because you would think they would want to reserve those for potential use if they get into a clash with NATO, because then those can reach out and do a lot from a long ways away when they have other missile systems they could use for the local. But they haven't. So that means it's really high priority for them. Whatever they fired at, whatever these missile concerns and factories that they fired at, they really do want them knocked out. So we'll take a look at that, because if we just keep on muddling along like this, then we'll have, I think John Mearsheimer calls it a frozen conflict, meaning that it's a conflict, it's just not going anywhere. And that's part of the frustration by some in Russia. They're saying, look, we're not going to finish this anytime in the next year or two at this rate. And who wants to just fight a forever war where there's whatever the Russian casualty figures actually are, they'll maintain that. And nobody wants this just perpetual loss of manpower, and it doesn't change on the battlefield. So we'll see what that's going to do. But there's some things to be paying attention here, because this thing could be blowing up right about the same time that we see stuff going on in the Iran war. And God help us if these things blow up simultaneously. This could be a really, really challenging time for the cause of peace around much of the world, certainly the Western world. We're going to keep an eye on this. Thank you very much, folks. We appreciate you today. We got a good lineup of a lot of folks coming up later in the week. Gary, what do we have tomorrow? I didn't see the lineup. What do we have tomorrow?
Oh, yeah. Give me a second. Let's see. Give me a second. Oh,
sorry, I threw another curveball at Gary right there. Anyway,
Danny, I think we've got Professor Morandi tomorrow, and we definitely have Scott Ritter.
Okay. Well,
dare we tell him that?
Hello, Garland Nixon here, hanging out with Andre Martianov. We might have another friend here or there. Larry Johnson might show up. There's other people that are thinking about it. So who knows? We're going to have fun tonight. Let's talk.
Ain't going to be Russia, So and well, here's Mr. From Florida.
Hey, man. I break out the cigar after 7 o'clock, man. It's cigar and Florida hat time.
Yeah. I wish I could do it, but then my wife will divorce me.
Bad news, guys. Things just got worse. Things went downhill. There goes the neighborhood.
Oh, good Lord.
Oh, my God.
Oh, my God. The whole company is here.
Hey, Scott, where's the damn shirt, dude? I saw you with a decent shirt on. Come on.
Garland did not say you were going to be here, so
okay.
I lack the adequate intelligence information to.
No, I know. Okay, all right.
But I am packing one to St. Petersburg. Are you going to be in St. Petersburg?
No, the invitation never came through, so
Oh,
I wish I was there.
The Economic Forum?
Pardon?
Economic Forum? You mean St. Petersburg
Yeah,
Economic
yeah.
Forum, right?
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
I call it Revenge Tour 26. To make up for when they yanked me off an airplane in 24. But it might be premature because they could yank me off an airplane in 26 too.
So we've got what we're talking about today is, Sergey Lavrov said to Rubio, basically, and this is the way I took it. I know you got some of those clandestine guys. I know you got people there all over the place, people that are supposed to be there, ain't supposed to be. Everybody get the hell out because the situations get ready to go real bad for them. Andre.
Well, I mean, it's clear that the nice talking is over, and again, they, due to the extremely low cultural, intellectual level of European elites, they view things like when you offer them like this famous Soviet cartoon, Leopold the Cat, which Leopold the Cat constantly tells those mice that, hey, dudes, let's go live like friends, let's, and then of course he takes this pill called Asverin. Once they got an Asverin, literally it becomes an animal, okay, and so and the consequences follow, and this is exactly what happened. And it was again since April 24, and then obviously with the Russian Defense Ministry publishing the list of the potential targets in Europe, with Italy having 40% of those manufacturing plants. But yes, Russia, obviously, and the United States, they are different weight leagues. Absolutely. United States still remains the nuclear superpower. And obviously they need to talk. And obviously Russians are not interested in killing American diplomats. But Europeans already stated that we're staying there. Okay, well, too bad. I mean, nobody cares if you get killed, if you somehow get into, the blast range of something like Iskander or Zircon. So, I mean, you have been warned, so to speak, and there you go. And nobody cares anymore. Simple as that.
Larry, interesting is Lavrov mentioned systemic or systematic attacks. What does that indicate to you?
Well, the question has been, I've heard several people ask us, well, why is Russia doing this now? Why didn't they do it 4 years ago? And I think the answer is they knew that there were U.S. intelligence personnel, there were U.S. military personnel, there were Western European personnel. And so in the previous 4 years, they didn't want to, run the risk killing them and escalating. They thought they could keep it contained. They've now decided, nope, you guys, if you're there, then you pay your money, take a chance. They're gonna start eliminating these command centers and intelligence centers, everything that helps Ukraine from a strategic standpoint and a tactical standpoint. And again, I think the Russians showed restraint over the previous 4 years. That's now history. We got the first clue of that when Dmitry Polyansky. Dmitry's he's a mild-mannered guy.
Yep.
But when he went on Danny Davis's show now 2 weeks ago and sort of laid down the law, I went, oh, because Dimitri's not one to go out there and do it all. He didn't wake up in the morning and say, hey, what can I say controversial today? No, he had a script, and he laid it out, and then it was reinforced by Sergei Rybkov 2 days later, and then now with Sergei Lavrov, tripling down, quadrupling down. So any U.S. personnel, intelligence, military, civilian contractors that are over there, you've been warned. Get out while you got a chance.
Scott, Sergei Lavrov reiterated the recommendation that foreigners evacuate the Ukrainian capital immediately. He said he urged that all foreign nations, including the U.S., quote, ensure the evacuation of their diplomatic personnel and other citizens from the Ukrainian capital. Scott Ritter.
Well, first of all, this is what compliance with international law requires. And I think we need to bring this point up because of the the irresponsible rhetoric coming out of the West about the war criminals in Russia and all this stuff. Russia's literally the only nation that does this. Israel doesn't do it. The United States doesn't do it. Nobody does it. Russia does it because Russia adheres to law. And another reason why it's important to bring this up is that Russia always has adhered to international law. This entire conflict is nothing but one big giant law manual on on how to approach modern conflict in full compliance with your obligations under international humanitarian law. So Russia's doing it again. I know there's a lot of people frustrated. They're like, well, if you give warning, they're going to leave. Yes and no. Yes, they'll leave. Civilians, that's what you want. No, if you don't think that Russia has Kiev wired by now, there will be some targets that will be hit that will be empty, that need to be hit for symbolic purposes. For instance, the Rada will be, I think, wiped off the face of the earth. The presidential buildings will be wiped off. There won't be anybody in there, anybody of significance. I don't think there'll be anybody in there. But it's important that the Ukrainian people wake up in the morning and see that the centers of power no longer exist. So I think this is why Sergei Lavrov did it. But the other thing here, too, and this is in keeping with Larry said, this last Victory Day, I went to the Russian embassy, and I think I've written about it and I've said it. It was a completely different vibe, and Russia has changed. I've been very critical of Gilbert Doctorow, and I still am, because I now more than ever know that he is an MI6 asset, 100% straight up MI6 tool, whose job was to, create narratives that sowed the seeds of doubt inside Russia. But these narratives were geared towards a liberal elite that no longer exists in Russia. They're gone. But what the British have been doing is echoing this narrative off the liberal elite onto a more conservative Russian audience that could be placated by Vladimir Putin, so long as you could make the case that escalation doesn't achieve anything, that we're winning. We're winning across the board economically, politically, militarily, and we're just going to continue the course, and we're not going to be distracted by this. The problem is the British, and you got to give the British credit where the British deserve credit. This drone campaign that the British have been running is a stroke of genius when it comes to psychological operations, hybrid operations, mental war, as Andrei Elnitsky will call it, creating doubt within Russia, doubt that Russia is winning, doubt that Russia can win, doubt that Russia has what it takes. You see, because the British are playing off the fact that the Russian government was literally locked into a policy of non-escalation. Took advantage of that by pushing red line after red line after red line after red line after red line. Operation Spider was the biggest red line in the world, and yet the Russians just blew that right off their back. They said, "Okay, so you struck our strategic bombers. We're not going to escalate," and they could go on and on and on and on. But the mood had changed, and I believe that this attack on the college was a deliberate attack done to, again, play the game of mental war with the Russians, because I believe the Ukrainians believe that, once again, the British believe too, that there would be a slap on the wrist, but the Russians wouldn't go for it, because they're getting ready. This is why this is happening now. They're getting ready to launch, the Ukrainians and the British are getting ready to launch the kill shot in June. And people need to understand that this war has changed. I know, Larry, I got in trouble with you last time I said that it's a game-changing event.
I'll forgive it.
This is a game-changing event. What's happening right now? The British have changed the game. They are involved in this hybrid war, this drone warfare that the Russians don't have an adequate response to, and doing nothing, i.e. staying the course, is costing the Russians severely. The British have just provided the Ukrainians with 16 to 20,000 drones, advanced drones produced outside of Ukraine. The British have also provided the intelligence for this, the AI. Palantir, the CEO of Palantir was just...
Allow me to interject here, Scott. But British are, in terms of ISR, impotent. It's American intelligence. Let's be very clear. Britain doesn't. It has like what, couple satellites. It's
no, I'm not talking about the British are doing the planning, intelligence planning. The Americans aren't doing the intelligence planning. The Americans are providing the intelligence, but the intelligence is being geared by Palantir. When you have a campaign where you're going to throw 6,000 drones into Russia over the course of several days, which is the campaign that Zelensky is getting ready to do, maybe against St. Petersburg during the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. I mean, we're talking about a big thing here. The targets, you don't pick 6,000 random targets on the map. You need a target generator. And just like the United States used against Iran, you get artificial intelligence in to do target generation. And this college, I believe, was picked up through AI-generated target. Why? Because all you have to do is look at the apologists of Ukraine in the West. They're showing photographs of college students wearing military uniform, college students from this college, saying, see, they're military. This is why we're attacking. Hey, you morons. They're civilians. Read international humanitarian law. ROTC programs and JRTC programs cannot be attacked because they are not active duty military. They're civilians, even if they're wearing uniforms. And these aren't ROTC. These are actual civilians participating in an annual competition that, they wear uniforms, but that's it. They're not military people. But AI doesn't know that. AI sees uniforms and says the college, and they generate a target. And this target was struck by Ukraine using, Chappie. But here's the other thing too. This isn't an accident. They were using what were known as FP1 drones, Firepoint-1 drones. It's a plywood thing, epoxy, But listen to the eyewitness accounts. Rockets being fired. FPV-1 is an airplane, a light aircraft. But the Ukrainians have strapped rockets onto them, which means, and they use these rockets to strafe positions, do counter drone positions before attacking with the main thing. This means there's eyes on target. That means there's another drone above filming, sitting back. We see the junior Starlink terminal on the drones. Clear example of the communication taking place. There were eyes on target attacking this thing. Why? Not because they thought there were civilians in there. I just think the Ukrainians actually went with AI and said, we're going in thinking we're getting a drone target here. And they attacked it. They made a fatal mistake because the mood in Russia isn't ready. It hit the tipping point. These 21 dead kids had resonated with the Russian people like nothing else has happened here. Even more than Kursk. And Kursk was big. Hundreds of elderly slaughtered by the Ukrainian forces when they're, the West doesn't understand how that impacted Russia. And this, again, is part of the mental war thing, because this is the frustration that builds up inside Russia when Putin doesn't do anything in response. These 21 dead pushed it over the top. Russia has no choice now. And this is the important part. The Ukrainians were winning. We're all here familiar with the OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act, decision-making cycle. And historically speaking, the side that is inside the other's decision-making cycle wins. Ukraine has been inside Russia's decision-making cycle on this drone warfare for about 4 months now. Ukraine is calling the shots, driving the operation, and they're getting ready to take it up to the next level, and this would have been problematic. This attack that's about to take place on Kiev, even though it's been given to Donetsk, is flipping the script. This is Russia taking control of the narrative. This is Russia making the initiative, and Ukraine will be responding. The West will be responding. Russia's inside the decision-making cycle, and this, I believe, is going to lead Russia to strategic victory this summer. This is it. I think we have crossed the Rubicon. I think Russia is going in for the kill, and I couldn't be happier, because I think the Ukrainians have had this coming for a long time. I don't know what Russia's going to do with Latvia and all the other problematic European countries. But I have a funny feeling that when they wake up, not tomorrow, but maybe on Wednesday, and Kiev is a smoking hole, they understand that there, but for the grace of God, go them. That is the future of every major European city of a nation that wants to continue this conflict with Russia.
Andre, the other thing is this: in listening to Lavrov and looking at this, okay, in the past it was okay, you did something and we're going to strike. I don't think this is going to be a one-time strike. I think this is going to be like, okay, let's finish this thing off.
Well, I mean, listen, I generally agree with Scott, but I have some issues about the OODA loop and the fact that, again, because if you look attentively at the operational data, which is coming, for example, from the military thought, or you look attentively at the losses of Ukrainian side, the tipping point actually, and all these attempts to do this, whatever. First, there is no AI. Palantir is nothing more than advanced signal processing system on the advanced algorithms. Russians have similar thing, but obviously they, for some reason, believe these nut jobs from Silicon Valley who won't understand the first thing about war. They think that if they collect data, garbage in, garbage out. That's what we had. Minap, remember? Minap, then now this Starobilsk, it's all the same. So it's not about that. It's about that Russians are 10 kilometers from the suburbs of Zaporozhye, and the start of the mandatory mobilization of women already, for example, in the eastern Ukrainian oblast. This tells you everything that's what is happening because their resources are drained, human resources are drained. And obviously the issue here is very simple. They've been hiding behind the back of the civilians. You can look up the videos when the MLRS by Ukrainians works from the courtyards of the apartment complexes. They sit there and launch, whatever they launch, HIMARS or what have you. And so that is now, nobody cares about this anymore, and they have been warned. And in this case, obviously Russia did what correctly stated about international law. You have so much time, get the hell out. If not, your problem, And so that's the issue. And it's not going to be one strike or two strikes, what have you. Russia has a lot of means, and it produces immense amount of the number of the long range and standoff weaponry, which high precision weaponry, which can deal with the issue. The situation now is absolutely correctly. Scott correctly stated that. I don't know if it's going to be Wednesday, but you have, I already spoke about it today, one very interesting detail, concurrent with what was happening with Kiev and Ukraine, because it wasn't just Kiev, it was like all over the place. It was burning. Tu-214R, which is extremely advanced. It has the synthetic aperture active phased array radar, which can look into very deep into the enemy territory, and it can detect little small targets. It can detect bikes basically. It can detect cars and soldiers and things like that. So it was making the laps, basically flew along the Finnish border, and that was happening just the moment it was the Kiev being struck. And this is a very serious aircraft, okay? And so if it flies somewhere there, that means what? We have the situation that already there are contingency planning, or as Scott stated, the target generation is in process. And the question now, what are you going to do with, for example, Baltic states? Finland was, have you heard today what Mr. Stubb, who is the stump from Finnish, said today? He said, we are ready to open the border with Russia. And as long as Russia says that it's not going to get all those, the African or what have you, the immigrants, we're ready to open the border. Why? What happened? Evidently, somebody called him and told him, you moron, not Helsinki. Russians not going to attack Helsinki, but Russians know where the actually NATO positions are, where the assembly area, bases, ranges, and things of this nature. So it might fly there. But I think the hint again, if we go back to the publishing by the Russian Defense Ministry of those 10 drone manufacturing plants. They're really not plants. They are shops, large shops. They are 40% of them out of 10. 4 out of them are on the territory of Italy. Hello. And the others are Poland and Germany primarily. So, and Germany is long overdue for stone rearrangement because obviously this is the country which is now driving this. And yes, I agree with Scott also. After Kursk was already British planning. It's typical British planning. They killed 80,000 of their own troops. These guys are amateurs. Okay, let's put it this way. And so the only thing they can do is terrorism, like planting the magnetic mines under the bottom of the civilian vessels and things like that. This is who they are. Terrorism and sabotage is the weapon of the weak. They are extremely weak. Operationally, they are a joke. So, but yes, it's Britain, but do not forget that main economic driver for years now behind that, apart from the United States, although granted with Trump administration it kind of started to somewhat, diminish, is Germany. And again, as in France, I spoke to Sevim Devgalen when we had the conversation at the Rangers show last weekend. And I was talking about the Istanbul and sabotage of the Istanbul negotiations, and she kind of intercepted me, and interrupted me, and I'm really happy that she did. And she said, "Oh, you think it's Boris Johnson and just Biden administration?" And she said, "I'm telling you, the main driving force behind them was Macron and France." And so we have the situation there. In terms of the diplomatic effort, Russia's plan and strategy, which looks like it's working, was to remove United States from the equation, which is happening, looks like. And there was a very special call today between, Lavrov and Marco Rubio, say, you know what, get your people the hell out of there. So Europeans, they already stated they will stay there. Well, they will be killed. Simple as that. And so this is the situation. And after that, we have to only wait and see what's going to happen to Europe. The question is not about Ukraine. Ukraine doesn't have resources to really fight anything. And so as the result, we need to wait and see. And I agree, but I don't know if it's going to be Wednesday, Thursday, or maybe next week. That Kiev will be demolished in the sense of whatever they have there. Their bases, like this base in the Bielefeld, will be probably polished with the additional, strikes. But that's it for Ukraine. And the question now, war in Europe, and Russia wasn't preparing for the war with Ukraine. She was preparing for the war with NATO, and that's what many people still miss. This critical fact.
Larry Johnson, this is what it says. The armed forces, this is Sergei Lavrov, the armed forces of the Russian Federation, listen to the words, were beginning systematic and consistent strikes against military sites and corresponding decision-making centers in Kiev, the ministry said. It sounds like this is, I'll put it like this. Kiev will not be a capital city that the decision its days as the capital city running the war, I think, are behind it. Anyway, Larry, your thoughts?
Yeah, Macron and Starmer and Merz, I don't think they'll be making any more trips to Kiev. I think the attraction of that site will be somewhat diminished. And let me state for the record, I agree with Scott. This is a game changer. Okay, Scott, you got it, buddy. Look, I think there's another factor here as well, and this sort of gave the Russians a great opportunity. I believe that Russian intelligence has had all of these decision-making centers in Kyiv penetrated. They've had Russian intelligence officers undercover or Russian assets in place. Now they've got a good reason for them to leave, to not be there without exposing them, number one. And then number two, as I mentioned before, with the Western presence that has been there all along, which I think was another reason that up to this point, Russia never struck. I had an interesting lunch today with a Mustang. So this was a kid that joined the Army when he was 17. 8 years in, he applied, went to West Point. So he ended up being one of the old men in the class. He was, and he went on to become an intelligence officer. And so he's now retired and he got, complete disability. He was a paratrooper, but he's also an intel officer. And he told me, he said, look, we weren't using a year ago AI. He said it was not, it was sort of the old conventional way that you'd select targets, et cetera. He says, now they're using AI for everything. And instead of verify, they get this information out of AI instead of saying, okay, let's double check that. No, they're not double checking. They're going with it, which, goes back to I think the points that both Andre and Scott were making, that this targeting, it was, the garbage in, garbage out phenomena has been quite present. So this is, this is where the United States and Europe grabbing a hold of this new tool. I remember when we first got, real-time drone footage, because I was working with JSOC back then. And man, it was like a monkey with a watch. They were all over. It was, quite enthusiastic. The same thing when they wound up being able to do VTC conferences with so everybody. So these new tools always get, oh my God, it's the greatest, latest. And so now they're trapped. They've trapped themselves with AI, that they're relying upon it for targeting without. The AI doesn't have the intelligence to say, okay, what are the second order effects? If this is wrong, what are the political consequences? Oh, what might this inspire the Russians to do in retaliation? And so I reemphasize, I think Scott's exactly right, that this combination of European and American hubris is going to bite them in the ass.
Scott, I also feel like that the Russians have been moving at their own pace, but I think they're going to smash Kiev's decision-making pace. They're going to do what they haven't been doing, but they're going to move. They may not declare war, but they're going to move to a war footing. But how does that affect the rest of it? Do you think they're going to be hitting the rest of the centers around the country or focusing on Kiev? Anyway, Scott.
Well, again, excuse me, I can't speak for the Russians because I don't know. And the last time I tried to pick up the phone to call Putin, he didn't answer. But just connecting the dots, we're seeing a paradigm shift. We're seeing the old paradigm shattered here, which means that this isn't just symbolic. This is the initiation of what the new war is going to look like. Why are they doing this now? I mean, if this is simply about blowing up the Rada, blowing up the presidential administration building, and hitting the train station, and then walking away, Russia's going to lose this war. They're going to lose it politically, because that means that Russia doesn't have what it takes to finish this conflict, and that's just sad, because Russia is winning this war right now. There's a lot of sacrifice being made on the ground right now. I mean, the fighting that's taking place there, it's interesting. I'll just, slight tangent, not too big of a tangent. I've been trying to penetrate the drone market, so to speak, in terms of information for some time now. And, and the point I was making to the Russians is, you guys publish a whole bunch of stuff. And for a guy like me who is old school, not AI driven, I look at everything. I freeze frame everything. I print out photographs and circle things and research and look. And I have looked at every single Russian drone that's been put out there. I've looked at every operation. I look at uniforms. I look for patches. And, I can build up a pretty comprehensive order of battle and talk about the tools used and, work into the tactics just on open source stuff that the Russians put out. But the Russians never wanted to talk about this in depth. They've rejected, the in-depth look because I guess because, that was their operational tempo, and they wanted to. They only want to release what they want to release. They don't want to let other people dig. Russia's letting people go in. I wish I was 30 years younger. They're letting people attach themselves in suicidal fashion to frontline drone units. When I say suicidal fashion, dangerous stuff. I mean, the war here is unlike any, but by attaching them and you follow what these guys are writing and what they're saying and look at their videos, you realize this war is unlike anything that's ever been fought before. That there is this gray zone between front lines that is, you don't have masses of troops operating there. You have 2 guys, 3 guys, 4 guys working drones, and there's this giant ballet taking place of drone infusion taking place. The Russians are prevailing, but it's slow work and it's hard work, and it's and I think that's where the Russians said we're going to win this, because the Russians now tactically are as good or even better than the Ukrainians. And then the Russians have units like Rubicon that can just come in and totally push the drone war over to their side. So Russia's very comfortable with what's happening on the front line. Don't read their Ukrainian propaganda and all that crap. Russia's in control of this battle. It's a slow battle. It's a hard battle, but Russia is 100% in control of this battle. And that's if the old paradigm was working. But now we have psychological work. Again, I would encourage people to study up on Andrei Elnitsky, former lieutenant general, advisor to Sergei Shoigu, and the author of Mental War.
Sorry to interrupt. He is actually a real advisor to real big time. I mean, he was advisor on the salary, so to speak. He served as an advisor. Though he's not lieutenant general, he is the state council of the second rank. He is he brilliant man. He's part of
he's a serious dude, and I've been working with Andre on a regular basis since Garland, when did we first meet him? November, right?
November, yes.
We interviewed him there, and then we did him again in March, and I'm in continuous contact with him. And so he's educating, schooling me on mental war. I've done Larry, we know information operations, we know psychological operations, we even know hybrid operations. Mental war is something totally different. It's completely different, and the British are doing this to Russia. And this is the game-changing thing about it. So Russia can't just focus on this battlefield now. Russia has to play the mental war game, counter mental war. And this is where the strikes on Kiev. This has to be more, and I believe it is more, than just blowing up known information, decision-making. This is a campaign. When you hear those terms, systemic and whatever that other word was, multi-syllables, too big for a Marine to remember. But when you hear these words, what that means is this is a campaign now. And it's a campaign that is going to be driven by this. Every campaign starts with an initiating action that then generates an enemy's reaction, which will be collected on. Here's the important part. Andre has spoken about Russian intelligence collection capabilities. The Russians have a collection management plan in place. They'll trigger, response, collect, act, trigger, response, collect, act. And this is a campaign now, a rolling campaign to destroy Ukraine's decision-making capabilities and to drive Zelensky and others into a corner where they can't get out and then kill them all. I think this is the rabbit hunt, or this is the fox hunt, or whatever the hell you want to call it. The hounds are on the loose, the fox is on the run, and it's not going to stop till Russia kills every single one of these son of a bitches who have been singled out by the Russian government as terrorists. It's not like this happened overnight. Every one of them has been named by Russia, and charges are on the books for acts of terrorism, murder. They're all complicit, and now justice is about to be brought. That's my feeling.
Andre, how does it change?
I agree with Scott. May I say something? Scott is absolutely correct. And there is another thing which many people do not follow it. And again, we cannot ignore it. There are a number of the European officials, including and American officials, who are charged in absentia with terrorism and crimes against humanity. So who was the last, the guy who was charged from the American high position, former somebody? So yeah, you can take a look at, there are all kinds of the MI6 CIA people there, and they are charged in absentia as basically, operating on terrorism. So, and Scott is correct, absolutely, in terms of what he described in terms of the campaign. It's campaign now, and yeah. So, sorry, Garland, that I interrupted.
No, go ahead.
I didn't want to forget this thing about the International Tribunal for Donbass, and certainly. So we have this issue, and it happens all the time. I am subscribed to a Telegram channel of the Investigative Committee of Mr. Bastrikin. Good Lord, they are all there. Those agents, those officers of Investigative Committee, they are immediately, whatever happens, and whatever happened in Starobelsk, they are there. They're documenting, they're creating record, they're gathering actually witnesses and evidence, and they know. And here comes this most important part, which many people also want to ignore, although Larry, being the spy that he is, he correctly stated that the Russians fired Kiev. There is a good human on the ground. The names of those people, their positions, their covers of the MI6 line, or the CIA guys, or whoever the military guys, they know who they are. Apart from the fact that obviously they know everything what there is to know about Ukrainian armed forces. And so it's not going to be just like, oh yeah, we signed some settlement. There will be no settlement now. There will be just utter destruction of the rest of Ukraine. Apart from the fact that essentially in terms of human, which is, I know it sounds horrible. I know it sounds terrifying, but essentially it all ended up with the extermination of the personnel and military means of Ukraine. And we know that, well, at least 2 million KIAs, so multiplied by 2, multiplied by 1.5, 3. So you have 5 million people, casualties, okay? So on Ukrainian side. And from what I know, and I know from people high level, division level, so that's already operational level, there is very little sympathy now. You either surrender or there is no POWs or anything. You just get killed, period. There is, and if you are, for example, drone operator, you're going to get killed. You're not going to be taken prisoner of war. And of course, Nazis like Azov and all that kind of things, they know if they are. That is why they're fighting desperately, but nothing they can do about it. They are losing.
Larry Johnson.
Yeah, well, look, we've spent, I keep hearing the criticism that, Russia's gone so slow, they're getting bogged down. I don't have as extensive experience with the Russian military personnel as Scott, but what limited experience I've had is these are some very smart people, and they're not driven by emotion. That is, while Russians can be very passionate, they're not going to let their heart make decisions for them. They're going to make decisions based upon the operational art of war, which, Andrei's written extensively about. And I still, encourage, if people haven't taken time to read his books, take the time. You will be a very well-educated person because, Andrei lived it, was part of it, and is able to, help sort of pull back the curtain. The Russians have been very methodical in going about this, and now I think we're at one of those moments where the worm has turned, and it is, the Russians still, unlike the United States, they still believe in international law, and they still believe in you're going to dot I's, you're going to cross T's, you're not going to, like in the lead up to the special military operation, they went through every conceivable diplomatic door that was possible to try to avoid that. and it kept getting slammed on them, slammed shut. And so, and again, I will quote Ray McGovern. I've always listened to Ray on this, and he said, if you want to know what the Russians are going to do, just listen to them. You know, the Russians are not a bunch of bullshitters. You know, they're not talking nonsense like Pete Hegseth. Sorry, Andre. Yeah. So when these statements that have now taken place over the past 2 weeks, they are, as Scott alluded to earlier, this is a game changer, what we're about to witness.
You know, Scott, the other thing is, for years, Scott and I have been doing like every week since this thing started, since like February or so. I mean, we've been going for all 4 years. We've been doing, Warrior Update with Scott, right? Every week, right? And we've at times looked at it and said, well, maybe it's going to be this summer. Maybe they're going to do this. Maybe, I have a feeling, Scott, we're looking towards the end of this thing. I have a feeling that they're going to smash Ukraine to hell. That, they've been, it's like this. If there's a fight and there's international law and there's like, okay, we don't want to kill civilians, but when it gets to a certain point, a military is going to say, we're going to try not to kill civilians, but we're blowing every damn thing up. And if some civilians get it, it's unfortunate. But, the willingness for unfortunate events to happen starts to rise, if you know what I'm saying. And I think we're getting to that point where you're a civilian, you need to get the hell away from Kiev and anything that looks like military, and the Russians are not going to be nice. And I think we are now looking at the end, and it may not be as long as any of them think, because they're going to turn this place to rubble, in my opinion. Scott.
Well, I have to take heed of the fact that my wife is constantly reminding me not to read the comments in chat. There was one that basically called me out. He said, Scott, you've been saying this thing's going to be over, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Hey, dude, welcome to the world of intelligence analysis. I was born yesterday, and unlike you, I don't know who you are, but I can probably bet that you haven't briefed the President of the United States. You haven't been to the White House Situation Room, that you haven't advised four-star generals during major combat operations, that you haven't briefed prime ministers, secretary generals, or presidents of other countries, or heads of intelligence agencies. I have, and I have a pretty goddamn good track record, and I'm proud of it. Garland and others invite me on, and they ask me to give assessments. And I always caveat it by saying, I don't know. But, I look at things. This special military operation has been an eye-opener because, my favorite one is, Scott, you said it's going to be over in 2 weeks. You're full of shit. Goodbye. Well, yeah, I did.
I get that, too. You're not alone.
Well, who else did? Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the director of the CIA, because everybody thought when this thing started, Russia was going to war. Not a single swinging dick out there said, well, it's a special military operation. We never heard of the term. And then the Russians throw it out there, and we had no clue what it was. What do you mean a special military operation? What's special about it? Close with and destroy the enemy through firepower maneuver. That's what you should be doing. Nope. Putin was playing a different game. And this has been an education. This past 4+ years has been an education in the art of Russian conflict, not art of war. Because, see, Putin's playing on a completely different level. First of all, one of the things people need to understand is that the war was never done about territorial acquisition. We now know that Russia was going to give it all back, that it was all done to get Ukraine to the negotiating table to bring about a conclusion of a Minsk-like agreement. They just wanted the damn thing to, this thing to end. One way, Russia was not looking for any territory. So all you NAFO bastards out there, pound sand, eat dick, whatever. I don't care about you because you don't matter. You don't know what you're talking about. And then, we see the conflict move on. But I have been doing this from a military perspective because that's pretty much my background. But this has been an economic war more than anything else. The economy of conflict is something that not too many people, we all talk about sanctions and blowback and all that. But when you get into the minutia of managing the Russian economy in times of sanctions and the numerous transitions that have to take place systemic transitions away from an orientation towards the West, supply chains, et cetera, to domestic production combined with a reorientation towards Eastern supply chains. I'm just learning this because I'm starting to talk to the right people because I'm tired of being wrong. I mean, it gets old after a while. You say the summer of 2024 is going to be the decisive summer. Well, it's not. Why? Because, Scott, you don't know what you're talking about. You're looking at the military, but this isn't just a military operation. This is a political operation. This is an economic operation that's designed to do a whole bunch of things. First of all, anybody that thinks that Russia wants Europe to collapse doesn't understand Russia. Russia doesn't want Europe to collapse. A collapsed Europe brings about chaos, anarchy. The Russians are all about stability, predictability. So they don't want this collapse. They want to manage this thing. And Putin is in there, the master of management. So every summer, look, I'm 100% correct. If Russia wanted to put pedal to the metal, they could have militarily defeated Ukraine a while back. But in doing so, they may have done irreparable harm to their economy, irreparable harm to their relations with the world. Russia's in the process of creating a multilateral world that's consensus driven, which means that Russia must take into account the opinions of other nations. And Russia listens. They have a master of the trade, Sergei Lavrov, who's out there gathering data, reporting back. You have great economists in Russia who are talking about the minutia of a national economy in transition. And then you have generals who are actually third in the tier here. The generals are saying, can we kill him? Can we kill him? Who's like, no, hold on, manage it. Don't go in for the kill yet. We're not there. Advance slowly. Remember, the goal is at this point in time, reconquest of the Donbass with the minimum number of casualties. The military's like, but we could kill them. Nope, manage. And this is what I got wrong because I would always put on my Marine Corps hat and say the time is right for the kill. And what I wouldn't do is put on a hat that I didn't possess, and I still barely have it, is the economist hat. Or I get a little bit of a geopolitical hat, but there's more at stake here than anybody possibly knows. The politics of de-dollarization, the politics of BRICS is so complex, and it all requires consensus-driven work that Russia can't up in the apple cart, so to speak, by going in for the kill on the battlefield. So I hesitate to talk about going in for the kill. The only reason why I'm confident this time is it's a game-changing moment. The game has changed, and Russia has set itself up for this victory. Their economy is doing okay. Is it great? No. There's sanctions. There's sanctions going on, but the economy is doing okay.
Oh, Scott disappeared.
NSA didn't like that.
Yeah,
Scotty's back.
Yeah, he's back.
But no, the economy's doing okay. Diplomatically, Putin just laid down a great relationship with China. They got BRICS, and then psychologically, and that's the other important thing here too. What is the Russian public willing and able to accept? And at this point in time, what I see is the Russian public now is unified like they haven't been unified for the kill, meaning that Putin now can take risks diplomatically, take risks economically, but he must go in for the kill. So I think that this is the summer of decision, and it's going to be done across the board. Can I predict that Russia is going to strike Europe? I mean, that's a tough call. If I were putting money on it, I'd put money on the fact that Russia will strike a European target this summer because they have no choice but to strike a European target this summer. And is Russia going for this? I'll leave it at this because I'm babbling right now. The Victory Day celebration, the theme that came across throughout was unconditional surrender. That was driven home. Unconditional surrender. The day of negotiation is over. Ushakov just came out and said there is no spirit of Alaska. Sergei Lavrov has said the American agreement incapable. There is no Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner riding with Kirill Dmitriev to the rescue here. That's done. This is now going in for the kill. And that's a game changer too, because the spirit of Alaska, which Russia was trying to create all those years when I was saying going for the kill, Putin saying, wait a minute, we're going to work with Trump here. We're going to do this spirit of Alaska thing. It's over. It's dead. It's been officially declared dead by Ushakov. Yeah. So it's dead. So Russia now only has one game. and that is to kill Ukraine. And it's going to be ugly. Russia will, of course, adhere to the rule of law, but I wouldn't take all those guys that just did their war tourism today, got off the train today to tour around Kiev. I don't know how they think they're getting home, but I have a funny feeling that train station ain't going to be up and running in a couple of days.
Yeah, I think what I heard really from Lavrov saying to Rubio, step aside. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Get out of the way. Look, we're not going to fight with you. We're the world superpowers. Let's be responsible and just you go your way and we'll go ours. We're getting ready to do what we have to do, and you step aside, and then we'll be okay. We'll deal with Ukraine. If the Europeans want to get froggy, as they say, we'll deal with them. But Ukraine is getting ready to find, it's getting ready to, as Pete Hegseth likes to say, FAFO. Ukraine's getting ready to find out. Andre.
Yep.
Well, yeah, I agree with Scott actually, and he stated one very important term: supply chains. This is not easy indeed because Russia has a massive economy. You have to reorient it, and now that after visit of Putin to Beijing and the full green light to power of Siberia too. It's a 50 billion cubic meters of gas and additional energy streams. So it's easy now because now Europe is cut off. And Scott was saying, if we want to bet money, I would say this. We have intelligence military people here. And I would say before that, I would say it was a possibility, but probability was relatively low. Let's say 10, 15% that Russia gonna strike. Today, I say it's definite possibility, but probability probably grew to something like 70, 75%. And I about to say a very horrible thing. I don't think that London is not, but some people in Berlin, when they will get up in the morning and they suddenly recognize there's no Bundestag, no BND, no Bundeswehr, and they say, hey, we can start life anew. Russia doesn't fight civilians. So they don't understand. There is no hiding in Brussels and those bunkers from what is going to fly there if it comes down to it, and there will be no nuclear. You don't need nuclear weapons to. There are so many times already have been stated. There is Article 19 of the foundation of the state policies of the nuclear containment, which are very specific in terms of the conditions and criteria which you need to meet to use nuclear weapons. No, Russia has enough conventional power, which is basically unheard of. Everybody saw what Areshnik does, and that's why they constantly try to classify the results of it, because you have to understand, to basically admit what devastation is there. So there are all kinds of ways to what I say. I stated this, I wrote about it 2 days ago, and I spoke about it today in my video, is that Europeans now, because they failed at normal policies, they failed at even governing themselves, because as Sergei Lavrov stated, playground of the Satanists. This is, when you have the foreign minister saying about Satanism, which rules Europe. So they have to live now in the state of their chronic diarrhea. They need to soil themselves 24/7 because this is the only way they understand anything. You cannot talk to Europeans. You just can't. They are, first, you have to look at who they are. They are wusses, pampered, pieces of shit, who never experienced any difficulty. None of them ever served anywhere. This Macron boy, France elected this dude, and whatever the thing he married to, or whatever the hell that is, they voted twice. And last time it was a landslide. You cannot just, corrupt the election and, do some mail-in whatever voting. That tells you everything you need to know about those people. So he won by the horrendous margin, over Marine Le Pen. So this is who they are. They are satisfied with this type of, so to speak. And when I spoke I don't remember if you listened to Larry. It was with you, I believe, when we talked to Dmitry Polyansky last time. Last time, you remember when I asked him, but hey, you have to endure this, Europeans. And what he said was revealing. You can, guys, those who listens to us, you can go to Randy Kredikos on the fly. And Dmitry says that, you know what, I don't see any even sense in me working in Europe, in the OSCE, Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, because he says, first, they are dumb. You literally have people who have no any idea. The only thing they know is, 22 started as small Russians are criminals. And he said there's no point doing anything. He only merely sits now in the position he has to endure. I don't know if he will be, he has to have the raise, in salary and things like that, and other perks, let them give him some pellets on the, on the shore of the Black Sea in near Caucasus, because he tells essentially it's useless. You cannot teach people. They will understand only pain and fear. That's a sad state of the affairs, but this is what it is today.
Larry, you get the last word, and I'll throw this at you. I've been saying for a while, the U.S. better not go back into Iran. That war is lost. Take the loss, negotiate what you can, and move on. Well, it looks like 2 catastrophic losses this year are on the horizon, because I think they're going to finish Ukraine off, and I think Trump's going to be sitting here in the White House looking at 2 catastrophic losses. Anyway, your thoughts on that? You get the last word, Larry Johnson.
Well, there's an interesting parallel between what's taken place in Iran and what's taking place in Ukraine in terms of, from the standpoint of Russia, as Scott mentioned earlier, the Russians now are more united behind Putin in respect to, Putin wasn't going to push the more aggressive route. He let the people catch up to him. Now the people are there and they're going to turn the heat up. What a contrast with Donald Trump, where Trump has gone just the opposite direction. He's ignored the voice of the people. He's tried to force people to catch up to him, and in fact, it's working just the opposite. And now he's stuck. He doesn't have any good military operations. In contrast to Putin, I had wondered, after listening to Dmitry Polyansky, that I was thinking, are they really going to go after Europe? And recognizing now that they're going to go after Kiev and the European presence and American presence there first, it's a step-by-step escalation. They're not going hit Europe first. They're going, this would give Europe another chance to say, maybe we better rethink our position, because the Russians now are damn serious. They have mistaken Russian patience for Russian incompetence, Russian weakness. And that is, I think they're going to find out that was a terrible mistake.
Go to Reminiscence of the Future. That's Andre's great website. Also, Smoothie X12 is his great YouTube show. Larry Johnson has sonar21.com. That's Son of a New American Revolution. You still have your YouTube site, Larry?
Several major explosions just rocked Iran, according to the Iranian media. One of them is in one of the key and most strategic areas in Iran, the Bandar Abbas city, which houses one of Iran's key ports in the region. And the reports were speaking about other explosions near the Sirik and Jask areas in Iran. This came following multiple reports of these explosions, but there weren't only reports of the explosions, there were also videos of them taking place, especially the ones next to the Bandar Abbas area. Who was bombing these areas? This was one of the images published from an area close to the airport in Bandar Abbas. Other videos showed the Iranian air defenses taking action in one of these areas, as we can see in this video over here. Clearly, we're talking about something big. It's not like a light response or a light attack, because the level of air defenses being deployed are quite intense. So who is attacking Iran? The last couple of times we spoke about an orbiter drone that Iran intercepted. That was yesterday. Multiple orbiter drones also invaded the Iranian airspace in the past several weeks, and there were other explosions in Iran that weren't explained. Likewise, there were other explosions in the region and in Israel that were not explained. Are we talking about an undercover war between the two countries, a secret operation happening here without a declaration of an all-out war, or what is it exactly? Chances are Israel is the main side behind this, with or without the knowledge and consent of the United States of America. Because from an Iranian perspective, there are talks. These talks are looking like they're not really achieving much, especially with the reports that are taking place today, both from Iran and from the American side. And Iran is also confirming that its new air defense system, the Arash air defense system, is shooting down enemy drones over the Gulf waters. That was also today before the reports of multiple attacks happening in the evening, or an invasion, right? A breach of Iran's airspace. So Iran is using new air defense systems. Some of them they used during the war, the ones that targeted the F-35s as well, without declaring which one that was at the time. But clearly we're seeing a lot of alertness coming from Iran, a lot of preparedness, active air defenses taking down attacks without any side confirming. But we did have a confirmation today from the American president, a couple of posts that are quite important. One of them is the following. The United States won't rush into a deal with Tehran. Negotiations are proceeding in an orderly and constructive manner, but the Iranian officials are saying that there are key differences that still need to be settled. That's from the American side. The Israeli side is talking about an explosion in the talks between Iran and the United States. Quote, they will never be able to stop us, according to a report in the Wall Street Journal. Talks between the US and Iran have encountered difficulties due to deep differences of opinion. The emerging draft understandings aim for an agreement that would open the Strait of Hormuz and are being watched with concern in Israel. Now, what are the Iranians saying about this? Is it an all-out explosion, or is there a level of problematic approach here coming from the United States of America? Today, there was a statement coming from Iran's foreign ministry, who said the following. The fact that we have reached a conclusion on a large portion of the topics under discussion is correct. However, to say that this means the signing of an agreement is imminent, no one can make such a claim. Policy making and decision making in the United States are suffering from a kind of an institutionalized vacillation. The repeated changes in positions, within a matter of hours, you are faced with different, often contradictory and conflicting viewpoints. This disrupts the process of any negotiation. Now, before the Iranians mentioned that, we could see it clearly from the American side. One day you'll have this optimism, the next day they'll have pessimism, and then they'll tell you about potentially attacking Iran. Donald Trump will post like an image of Iran as the United States, another AI image with him in the Navy, and then with bombs, and I hope you get the message and have a good day. Is this a country looking to get a deal, or is this a country that is looking to put the other side in a confused mode where they can hope to get a certain agreement in place, but they might be surprised at one point and have an all-out explosion? Not only that, it's not just the changes. The United States is outright lying about certain things deliberately through its media arm. And one of these lies that have been published recently is the fact that Iran is willing to take out some of its uranium from the country, potentially to a third country, with limited enrichment of uranium. To which today the Iranian media reported and responded with the following. The reports about Iran's readiness to remove enriched uranium from the country are false. And they describe this as American psychological warfare. The United States has been constantly doing that, and now they're trying to make it appear as a condition that Iran agreed to. They also added in this report that this is a psychological warfare, and that the text of the Memorandum of Understandings does not include any statement indicating Iran's readiness to remove nuclear materials from the country, noting that the memorandum did not include any commitment regarding any nuclear action. So Iran is in essence saying that the United States is firstly changing its positions regularly within hours, then lying about what Iran accepted or did not accept. They are downplaying the positivity that has been flooding with reports in recent days that we're very close to a deal. Iran is telling everyone, calm down. No, we're not an hour away from signing a deal. And the president of Iran also said that in essence they want us to surrender, and that's not something that we're going to do. Iran will not surrender to excessive US demands and seeks full restoration of its rights. Speaking at a meeting with members of the Chamber of Commerce on Monday, Pezeshkian noted that after failing on the military front, the enemy has now concentrated its efforts on economic warfare. The Islamic Republic of Iran will not surrender to excessive pressures and demands under any circumstances, he said. And that, again, has been elaborated further. From the Iranian army side, they're not even considering any sort of agreement. The armed forces, the IRGC and the Iranian army. There were a couple of statements from senior figures. One of them was Admiral Sayari, who bluntly dismissed the idea today, according to a report in the Tasnim news agency, about any agreement with the United States, saying that when he was asked about the potential negotiations, he declared, agreement? I don't even know the meaning. I don't even know the meaning of that word, he said. So from the Iranian army's perspective, they're not really counting on any sort of agreement happening between the United States and Iran. And what they're doing in essence is only preparing, and that's why they have their hand on the trigger now with all of the air defense systems being active within immediate effect following any act of aggression or potential act of aggression against the Iranian territories. So a lot of uncertainty, lack of clarity. We have very suspicious attacks, and one of the primary suspects in this is, of course, Israel. They're the ones who are saying that there are explosions in the negotiations. It's not going to happen. And just now, after multiple days of reports that, okay, there might be a deal, Netanyahu decided yet again to declare war. Now he's saying that increased blows in Lebanon, and they're planning to what they call remove immunity in Beirut, in essence strike Beirut. That was also confirmed by the IDF chief of staff, who said that we're going to start attacking in Beirut. The Minister of Finance said for every FPV drone, we're going to take down 10 buildings in Beirut. Why are they doing that? Well, they're suffering tremendously from the Lebanese resistance. Netanyahu confirmed that today, although he also said that they targeted like 600 of the Lebanese resistance fighters when they've been targeting medics and families and emergency services in Lebanon. But one thing that they're really confirming that's hurting them is the FPV drones. And now Israel is confirming that the Lebanese resistance has FPV drones with night vision. Now that is a game changer. That's a new weapon coming in, and that's very problematic for Israel. This came in the Israeli Broadcasting Authority website about the video that the Lebanese resistance released, showing the first use of an explosive FPV drone equipped with a thermal camera. Until now, the resistance only used drones during the day, and the new threat catches the forces off guard. Now, Netanyahu today, in his statement, he tried to undermine all of that. He said that we are getting hit, but it's not to the level that everyone is speaking about. In essence, we're getting hit, but we're still capable of continuing to attack. And we know that the FPV drone thing is a challenge for us, but rest assured, we are working on it now, and we're working to solve it. He was saying that the residents of the North are doing a tremendous job in their resilience when they are the most critical voices against Netanyahu and their lack of what they call decisive action. Now, why is Israel behind this? And does Trump have a different approach, but he's always being pressured? So let's try and read what Trump said in the past couple of days. Trump said a couple of days ago that there are voices who want him to continue, and there are voices who want him to stop. Continue with the talks, and then stop and have war. In essence, we heard Lindsey Graham, we heard the Israel First and Zionist voices in the United States talking about any deal with Iran being ridiculous, in essence, and they have been pushing for more attacks. So he's definitely under pressure, let alone that he himself is compromised. But more importantly, what he's doing, or what he may do or let Israel get away with, because according to Netanyahu, his conversation with Trump protected Israel's right to have operations everywhere, including in Lebanon. But let's not forget what Donald Trump said not long ago when they were having talks with Iran, that Israel will not be bombing Lebanon any longer. They are prohibited from doing so by the United States of America. Enough is enough. He posted that on X, and that was when Israel was escalating the attacks against Lebanon, simultaneously with the talks beginning from the American side with Iran when they were trying to reach a deal. So there's definitely conflicting messages there from the American administration, and there is definitely pressure here from the Israeli side against the United States of America. Now, that's coming when both Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump are not doing well. Benjamin Netanyahu was taken to hospital. According to his office, he's going for dental work, but there is a lot of concern here, and there was a lot of criticism about the medical information being withheld from the public. especially after Netanyahu had a long delay in confirming his cancer. Netanyahu has a pacemaker, he had cancer, he might still have cancer and hide it because they said they got rid of everything. And now all of a sudden they're sending him to hospital and he's leading a country in essence to war. He's continuing with more wars. But it's not only him, it's also the American president, Donald Trump, who's facing more questions, according to this report, to do with his health after another trip to Walter Reed. This is his third scheduled medical checkup in 13 months. Outside physicians say that they have persistent questions about the nearly 80-year-old president's health and fitness. So both of these people are in very bad shape. They're in very bad form. They're being checked 24/7, yet they're leading the whole world to potentially a total disaster. Now, Trump himself isn't just talking to Iran. We spoke about yesterday the demands that he had from some of the Arab states, and today there was a confirmation about what he wants from them by confirming it. He actually confirmed it in one of his posts today. A very long post, we're not going to read all of it, but in essence, what Donald Trump is talking about is that some of these countries are in essence ordered to have a peace deal with Israel. It should start with the immediate signing by Saudi Arabia and Qatar, and everybody else should follow suit. If they don't, they should not be part of this deal. And that shows bad intention. Some of them, according to him, they would be honored to do so, join the Abraham Accords, but the tone, they should. Therefore, he's saying, I am mandatorily requesting that all countries immediately sign the Abraham Accords, and that if Iran signs its agreement with me as President of the United States of America, it would be an honor to have them also be part of this unparalleled world coalition. The Middle East would be united, powerful, and economically strong. So he is delusional to a level where he thinks that Iran would join the so-called Abraham Accords when the countries that joined the Abraham Accords are being criticized for joining it by their own people. The UAE, you saw what it attracted to you because Israel used you as a hub, in essence, to attack Iran. But what is this language? And is that a language acceptable by these countries? Has there been any sort of response coming in? According to a report that came from Saudi Arabia, Saudi Arabia made it very clear to Donald Trump that they will not be signing the Abraham Accords unless there is a clear path to a Palestinian state. And there's no turning back from it. Is that something that Israel is willing to agree on and confirm? No, because Israel was offered a deal following the multiple proposals by the Biden administration at the time. Saudi Arabia said that it has to have a Palestinian state. And Israel said, no, we don't want to confirm that, we're going to have a Palestinian state. That's not going to happen. But today, Saudi Arabia, they outright rejected the demand. They said that it will only normalize. There's an irreversible pathway to an independent Palestinian state. So outright denying or going against this proposal coming from Donald Trump, that has a lot of audacity to it. They should, and it's mandatory on them, and they must do this in that way. Again, it was also reported in Israel because they're monitoring it very closely, and they might just be the side that is pushing for this. According to them, Riyadh pushed back with its firm condition: no normalization without an irreversible pathway to a Palestinian state. And according to Israel, this is putting both sides on a collision. Why? Because they are the ones who are pushing Trump to do that. Israel wants to also reap as many new rewards as possible. And you can see with that how all of it is linked to Benjamin Netanyahu. How? Well, he has several options. Either there's a deal with Iran, but that deal isn't an embarrassment for Israel. If it's only with the United States and Iran and with the other Arab countries, and Israel really isn't getting anything, that's a huge failure for him when he really wants to stay in power. So in that case, he would want it to be a deal that would appear to be a political accomplishment, a diplomatic victory, an Israeli historic breakthrough. Now they have deals with all sorts of countries, and they've protected their right for generations. And in essence, they have legitimacy from Arab and Muslim countries, assuming there would be a deal. And that's why Trump is mentioning that now. But if that won't include Israel, and if Israel won't get that, and we've had an outright rejection, at least from Saudi Arabia in the first instance, then he still has the option of war. And that's why he is now escalating with Lebanon, declaring an escalation of the operations in Lebanon, and potentially having these attacks against Iran, although Israel didn't take responsibility for them, with the drones, with breaching the Iranian airspace. So he's playing a very sensitive game here with Donald Trump. He's seeing that there is an increased demand from the United States to have a deal. They didn't even want this war. But if that's not going to include Israel, he's not going to be in it. And he will suffer badly. It's not going to be good for his reputation. Slim chance of him winning any elections in the upcoming Israeli elections. And the timeline is very tight, several months. They still haven't confirmed the date yet, but before October 2026, he has to do it. Does he come to the Israeli elections with a huge political and diplomatic achievement in the form of countries coming to the so-called Abraham Accords, or does he come with an unprecedented military accomplishment that he can convince the people in Israel that further weakened Iran? That's the only thing that they're talking about now, by the way, in Israel, to further weaken Iran. They're admitting, in essence, that they can defeat them. So further weaken them. That's one of the two. This is what he's looking for. But it isn't just that. Now Israel is looking to change the status quo of Al-Aqsa Mosque in full coordination with the United States, remove the custodianship of Jordan that has a custodianship over Al-Aqsa and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, in essence, the key Islamic and Christian locations in Jerusalem, by, according to what they're telling us now, switching it from like a Muslim location to a multi-faith location. And listen to the terminology, like a multi-faith location, right? Open to all religions. You'd think to yourself, if you're sitting there and everything is normal, yeah, multi-faith, everyone visits, we share things and whatever. How beautiful is that, you'll think. The reality on the ground is where we have an illegal, brutal occupation of a pariah, genocidal, supremacist entity across all of Palestine that is committing a genocide now, preventing people from praying in Al-Aqsa Mosque whenever they want, killing people, invading the place itself, the third holiest site in Islam, and shooting people and killing them inside and having mass arrests. But what is this multi-faith idea, and why is Trump pushing for it now? Well, he's pushing for it because Israel is asking him to. Now listen to this. Both of them, US and Israel, are working to strip Jordan of Al-Aqsa custodianship. Before we get into the details, the custodianship itself isn't that effective on the ground. Because Israel, in essence, does what it wants to do in Al-Aqsa Mosque, with or without the custodianship of Jordan. But Jordan still had some sort of a say, and, you know, this symbolic approach that applied diplomatic pressure on Israel, or at least showed what's happening there without, in essence, changing a lot on the ground. But if the United States and Israel want to strip them of this custodianship, that means they would be able to do whatever they want. Now listen to the details of what they want and what is the greater plan here. So multiple sources told MEE that under the plan championed by Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who has no official role in the administration, and the ambassador Mike Huckabee, in essence challenging the Jordanian-backed Islamic Waqf. They said that it would abruptly end, and a new body created by the Israeli government would declare Al-Aqsa Mosque a multi-faith center. So Jared Kushner, we know who Jared Kushner is, and Mike Huckabee, both of them like this, some of the staunchest Zionists and Israeli bootlickers, pushing for this campaign. And for the first time, this is official US support, although again, Jared Kushner doesn't have any role, to allow Israel to convert to a multi-faith hub. Firstly, does Israel have authority? Even Israel doesn't have authority over Palestine. They're an illegal occupation. Then what is this multi-faith thing a cover of? So is anyone convinced that Israel wants to live in harmony and peace in Jerusalem when Israelis kill Muslims and Christians regularly, spit at churches, beat women in the streets, harass and attack churches, when the Israeli police goes and attacks Christian clergy and has all of these acts of aggression and terror and barbarism against religious minorities? Are we convinced that they want to turn this into a multi-faith place where people would like pray side by side? And again, listen to the terminology, the Abraham Accords, multi-faith, right? Well, let's come together. Come together as what? To hide what? To whitewash what? You come together as people when you are in a situation where there's mutual respect, equality between the two, and no hostility coming from one side towards the other person. Not under the Zionist boot of apartheid. That is simply a situation where Israel would be whitewashing its brutal apartheid and plans to destroy Al-Aqsa Mosque, or at least parts of it, and build this facade of a third temple that they claim was there at some point. There's nothing connected to these people there. The oldest community that follows the Torah, says it follows the Torah, in historical Palestine are called the Samaritans. Samaritans, the holy place is in Mount Gerizim. That's the West Bank. That's Nablus. It's not Jerusalem. They have archaeological support. They have evidence there. Israel has been digging and is digging now under the compound for decades. They haven't found anything, to a level where they fabricate evidence to try and say, oh yeah, they belong to us. As if they are the descendants of the previous people who were there. It's like, you immigrated from other countries to create this pariah supremacist ethno-state. They constantly go from one holy place to another and change the name. So you will go, for example, and see a Christian saint or a Muslim imam from 1,000 years ago. And they'll change the name and make it a Hebrew name. Oh, was an old rabbi. It belongs to us. A situation where they Judaize everything. And now they want to Judaize Al-Aqsa Mosque with the blessing of the United States administration led by Jared Kushner, who has no role. Can you imagine the level of what's happening here? And the United States of America is playing ball with it. That is the unprecedented situation, especially in terms of the level. Like, we knew that the United States helps Israel and vetoes for Israel and supports Israel with everything, diplomatically, militarily, all of that. But there were some limits. As in, some American presidents, as a matter of fact, all of them before this one came, they had limits with the Israeli prime minister. They would tell him, that's the limit. No. They'd tell him, attacking Iran, that's crossing a line. We're not going to do it. Again, not taking away from the fact that they did stuff on behalf of Israel, and the list goes on. But Trump, in essence, is giving a blank check for Israel to do whatever it wants, regardless of the repercussions of the American relations with other countries, with other strategic allies, like for it to come to a level where Saudi Arabia would have to go out after a post from Trump and outright go against it, go at loggerheads, in essence, with the Abraham Accords thing. After he says it's mandatory for you to do so. And then tomorrow he'll tell them, yeah, well, it's mandatory also to accept Al-Aqsa as a multi-faith thing, and it's mandatory for you to give Israel sovereignty over your territories. It is ridiculous. He is working so much on behalf of Israel, and it says a lot when he has a 99% approval, according to multiple reports in Israel, and his approval rates in the United States are like 30, 35. Wouldn't be surprised if it's less than that, on the decline. And it's difficult to see how this president, who serves Israel to that extent, that no other American president reached before him, would have the capacity to reach any sort of deal of substance, whether it be with Iran or any other country, without the full approval and backing of Israel, which will be conditional to certain things that the United States itself, again, never agreed to before in history. Right now, misinformation spreads faster than fact. These attacks or the response. Another major development now, the United States CENTCOM confirmed that they were the ones who attacked Iran, now with this recent confirmation from CENTCOM that they carried out self-defense strikes. Navy Captain Tim Hawkins, a spokesman for the U.S. Central Command, said that the attacks were self-defense strikes and included missile launch sites and Iranian boats attempting to emplace mines. There was no announcement of any change in the temporary ceasefire between the United States and Iran so far. U.S. Central Command continues to defend our forces while using restraint during the ongoing ceasefire, according to the United States. What kind of a ceasefire and what kind of self-defense is this? Attacking another country, attacking air defense systems, and boats trying to place mines. There were also casualties. Iran confirmed that 4 fishermen were killed in this attack, and they published images of them following the US strikes. Initial reports said that it was the IRGC that was killed. Iran said they were actually fishermen. There is no response yet coming from Iran about this attack. There is no confirmation whether there will be a response so far, or is this going to be like the thing that will break everything? This could just be the declaration from the United States that the war is resuming. According to an official from the United States, he also said the following to Al Jazeera: Iran attempted to attack US forces over the past 24 hours, and the Iranian attacks did not result to any injuries to US forces members. So attempted, but then no injuries following the attacks. They don't even know what they're talking about. Is it an attempted attack or is it an attack? What is the case here? So if the United States now confirmed that these attacks that took place in Iran were them, Iran is not saying anything so far about these attacks or the response itself. What does this declaration mean? And why did they declare? Why did they not carry out certain operations without really saying much to try and continue this talk? Well, it's because there's something very sensitive happening now. The level to which the deal or the talks in this deal reached were very high. You see, there were recent visits coming from senior Iranian figures to Qatar, the foreign minister and the speaker of the parliament, the head of the Iranian central bank, went to speak about unfreezing assets worth 12 billion US dollars. In essence, America's freezing them, but through Qatar. And they were talking about a gesture of goodwill to continue the talks, but the United States and the Trump administration would be able to say that, no, it's not us, it's Qatar, that doesn't relate to us, so that Donald Trump doesn't appear to be, giving in, although we all know that that's the case. But there was also a very high-level meeting taking place with senior Pakistani figures in Tehran who just left before the attack of the United States, talking about how to finalize the deal. So in essence, if this was a game that the United States administration and Trump were playing, this whole ceasefire talk thing, they wanted to show their counterparts that they're very serious in trying to reach a deal, but then when things are about to get more serious and implemented and, unfreezing some of the Iranian money, 12 billion going to Iran, and then we might actually need to sign something, let's break it in the last second. How tied is that with the Israeli demands and the Israeli moves? Well, very tied. Israel firstly just declared an increase in the operations. Donald Trump just, in essence, tied this whole deal with Israel, because so far, in Israel, they were saying, look, we're out of the picture. He's just talking to them. Trump just, again, as we're used to Donald Trump, landed a nice bombshell to the Arab countries, telling them you have to have a peace treaty with Israel if you want to be included in the deal, and that is mandatory. And I order you, in essence, to do that. Who is that for? That's not for him. He couldn't care less. That's an Israeli order. That's the lobby's order. That's the decision-making's order. So Israel is yet again jeopardizing this whole deal directly through the actions of the American president. No one can say that, oh yeah, Israel is the side playing. No. It's the American president being played around through Israel. Israel, the United States is one anyway, but looking at it from a broader perspective, the United States may at certain moments have interests that are not really aligned with Israel. Israel doesn't have a defense pact with the United States. Why is that? Because they know they have interests that are not like the United States. They don't want to die for the United States. They want the United States to go and die for them. So now Netanyahu is playing his last trick. That's why he was confident in dismantling, that's it, taking down the Israeli Knesset, the government, and called for early elections, because there's something in the pipeline, either in the form of a large-scale attack or a very hefty offer in the form of peace deals with Arab countries. So now the American army itself is doing Israel's work by confirming this act of aggression against Iran, to which Iran is likely to respond. Listen, this could just be a declaration of war, and Iran might declare a True Promise 5 and not really wait for that much longer. There were skirmishes throughout the ceasefire. There was an operation that was beginning and then canceled. There's the blockade. There were back and forth threats and attacks. There were unexplained attacks too. But this move from the United States now might just be the move that resumes the war, ends the ceasefire for good, and Iran might just declare a large military operation, either as a responsive measure or a continuing operation, because from their perspective, the United States, in essence, just killed the negotiating path to try and reach a deal. Right now, misinformation spreads faster than facts, especially on the most sensitive global stories. And
Massive explosions were just heard by the Strait of Hormuz, the United States military confirming that it has targeted missile launch sites and Iranian boats, which it says were placing mines in the Strait of Hormuz. How will this impact the negotiations that have been taking place between Iran, the United States, with Pakistan as the mediator? Here's what we learned just went down. So multiple massive explosions were heard across the Strait of Hormuz, coastal cities of Bandar Abbas, Sarik, Jask, and a military base, with reported hits around these areas. At first, the cause was unknown. This was reported by Fars and Tasnim. Tasnim, which is Iran's local media, talked about how sources are hearing 3 massive explosions around Bandar Abbas. Ali Hashem from Al Jazeera reporting, an Iranian source tells me that heavy gunfire can now be heard near Bandar Abbas, which erupted after the IRGC targeted a vessel at sea, followed by U.S. fighter jets striking IRGC naval boats in the Gulf. According to the source, several IRGC Navy personnel were killed in the attack. The situation is still unfolding, the sources told Ali Hashem of Al Jazeera. A source that's close to MB Ghalibaf, Iran's parliament leader, noted the following. Tonight, strikes were on Bandar Abbas Airport, Shahid Bahanar Port, and likely Mount Mubarak in Jask. A decisive response from Iran is currently underway. And folks, we're hearing from CENTCOM spokesperson Captain Tim Hawkins, just told state regime media, which calls itself Fox, the following. U.S. forces conducted, quote, self-defense strikes in southern Iran earlier to protect our troops from threats posed by Iranian forces. Targets included missile launch sites and Iranian boats attempting to place mines. U.S. Central Command continues to defend our forces while using restraint during the ongoing ceasefire. ongoing ceasefire and you're talking about strikes targeting launch sites and Iranian boats and potentially killing people there, doesn't really sound like a ceasefire to me. More details surfacing on U.S. strikes versus Iranian targets today being reported by Jennifer Griffin of State Regime Media. 2 Iranian boats were caught laying mines in the Strait of Hormuz, senior U.S. officials are telling Fox. Their regime media. The U.S. military eliminated both IRGC vessels and also struck at a surface-to-air missile site in Bandar Abbas that was targeting U.S. warplanes. These were defensive strikes, CENTCOM noticed again or mentioned again. Defensive strikes while you seem to be offensively striking. Okay. They do not indicate ceasefire is over, according to 2 well-placed sources. Also, Jennifer Griffin writes, I am told the U.S. strikes are over for now. Again, these were defensive in nature, not offensive, they keep on saying, and not an effort to break the ceasefire. The U.S. military says it reacted when they saw 2 IRGC boats laying mines, and then also saw a surface-to-air missile site targeting its warplanes. Let's talk about what else we're seeing as well. This is how Clash Report says. U.S. or joint U.S.-Israeli jets struck 2 IRGC Navy speedboats off Larak Island in the Strait of Hormuz, killing at least 4 Iranian personnel. The strike occurred roughly 48 hours before the report surfaced. This is a new report that we're seeing right now. Iranian media were under pressure not to establish the story to avoid disrupting ongoing negotiations. That's what's being reported there. Then Donald Trump reported this. The enriched uranium, nuclear dust, will either be immediately turned over to the United States to be brought home and destroyed, or preferably in conjunction and in coordination with the Islamic Republic of Iran, destroyed in place or at another acceptable location with the Atomic Energy Commission or its equivalent being witness to this process and event. Thank you for your attention to this matter, DJT. Barak Ravid over at another state regime media propaganda outlet, Axios, which just is basically Trump's stenographer. Here's how Axios is saying it. This is important, this post by Donald Trump, they claim. It appears there is some flexibility here in the American position regarding the ways to eliminate the stockpile of enriched uranium and a certain rapprochement with the Iranian position. And there was also a rumor that Qatar was going to be giving a $12 billion loan to Iran instead of the United States giving Iran $12 billion in terms of sanction relief immediately before Iran agrees to open the Strait of Hormuz. Well, the advisor to the Prime Minister of Qatar, Dr. Mahid al-Ansari, the spokesperson for Qatar, rather, says the following. The reports suggesting Qatar offered $12 billion to Iran to secure a deal are simply not true and are being circulated by parties attempting to sabotage the deal and undermine ongoing diplomatic efforts towards regional de-escalation and stability. Qatar's diplomatic role in coordination with regional partners is well established and publicly documented, and such narratives are nothing more than desperate attempts to tarnish Qatar's reputation as a trusted international peace facilitator. Reading between the lines there, it seems that Qatar is suggesting that Israel is spreading these rumors, or it's coming from people within the Trump regime who want to try to undermine the ongoing framework of the deal that was reached 48 hours ago between Donald Trump, a Pakistani mediator, and Iran, which Donald Trump seemed to go back on when Donald Trump said he will only enter into a deal with Iran if Arab nations agree to join the Abraham Accords and open up a peace treaty with Israel, which Arab nations like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Pakistan say under no circumstance will they do that until Israel permanently recognizes Palestine and a two-state solution. But Donald Trump seemed to suggest that it would be a mandatory requirement that Arab nations agree to the Abraham Accords with Israel and form alliances with Israel if the United States was to enter into a peace agreement with Iran. We also heard from Ali Hashem, again from Al Jazeera, who says, an Iranian official source tells me Tehran has warned Washington that any Israel attacks on Beirut or the southern suburbs would seriously jeopardize ongoing efforts to end the war and could derail the diplomatic track altogether, because that followed Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister, and defense minister Katz holding talks earlier today where they say they will be expanding military operations in southern Lebanon. Israel's Channel 14 is reporting that. Drop site with a good summary here. Netanyahu did a video message about this, saying the IDF has prepared broad strike plans targeting buildings and infrastructure that it claims is being used by Hezbollah. And this news comes amid what the Israeli outlet describes as a particularly difficult month in the northern sector, with 11 Israeli soldiers killed, mostly by explosive FPV drones. And then the Trump regime leaked to Barack Ravid through, quote, senior U.S. officials that the Trump regime would support an escalation of Israeli military involvement in Lebanon, when Iran had said that any ceasefire or permanent security guarantee must cover Lebanon as well and must cover Iranian proxy groups like Hezbollah. And so, in other words, you have a lot going on here, and you have the United States military strikes near the Strait of Hormuz, as 48 hours ago, it seemed we were moving closer to a potential peace agreement, although whenever they come very close to reaching peace agreements, the same way we saw when Oman's foreign minister negotiated a peace agreement, we saw Pakistan do the same. That's often when Trump and Netanyahu do their invasions at that point in time. Now let me show you what Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson said when asked, why are you not responding to these U.S. media? With all of these media reports, why aren't you responding to everything Trump says? Play this clip.
Why you are not responding to the U.S. media reports? I believe we have more important works to do than responding to the U.S. president's posts or the other malicious media campaigns, including caricatures posted on the social platforms. We have works that are more important than responding to these trivial issues. We are working in order to arrive at the best solutions to maintain and safeguard the interest of our countries. At the same time, we are responding. We are not responding to each and every comment. We are a cultured, educated, and developed people. At the same time, we respond to the enemy's aggression accordingly, as was the habit in the past.
And here's what Donald Trump's former national security advisor said moments ago. This is John Bolton, Trump's former national security advisor. Let's play it.
He thinks everybody wants to make a deal on just about anything. That's not what these people are into. And they can see that Trump is so palpably desperate to have a deal that he can declare to be a victory and that lowers prices of gasoline. And they're playing him on that. They're stretching him out. They're buying time. All of that works in their advantage.
Now, with all of this taking place, Trump focused on building a UFC stadium in front of the White House. You can see construction crews busy setting up the new UFC stage on the White House South Lawn, as Andrew Leiden reports. And then here's a video. I'll show you the B-roll right here. Libby Dean reports about the structure for UFC fight being pieced together on the White House South Lawn, just making an utter mockery of our country while this purported peace agreement is blowing up quite literally and figuratively. That's the update for now. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 7 million subscribers. Thanks, everyone.
Kofi, follow me.